All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Erin Mihal. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Emory University. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping announcements for today's session. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in the learning development webinars and the programs are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or views of Emory University, the Emory Alumni Association, or its affiliates. The content provided in this program is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement by the Emory University's Alumni Association or the university itself. This session is being recorded, so please keep your microphones muted to avoid any distractions. If you have questions throughout the session, please feel free to share them in the chat, and I will be keeping an eye out for that. Today's session is eligible for our certificate of attendance. So if you respond to the email afterwards, we can get that set up for you. Right now, it's for the exciting part for me. I get to introduce to you guys and welcome back our featured speaker, Scott Doyne, who was back by popular demand after his amazing book club talk last month. Was it last month or February? Sorry. Scott is the founder of Doyne Career Services, and he is a certified coach who has conducted over 1,000 career coaching sessions with emerging and executive clients in career transition. He is a former sports media executive and the author of the Amazon bestselling new release, Exploring the Midlife Crisis, Career Crisis, Navigating the 4 Stages of Career Transitions. Please help me welcome Scott.
Thank you, Aram. It's great to partner with you again. Although we're not at a brewery this time, which was quite a lot of fun, I like the opportunity to have a virtual session, not only live, but if people have a chance to watch stuff on demand. People are busy, whether they're in role or job searching. It's not that noon Eastern time is perfect for everyone to drive through Atlanta traffic, especially. So thank you for having me again. We are going to talk about career transition. It's a tough topic. It's a serious topic. And it's what I based my book on last year was my own career transformation, moving from career in sports media, working my way up from intern to executive, and then transforming into what you see now, the same person, but a new purpose, a new mission, a new calling, I really do believe, as a certified career coach. Before I pull up the slides, I'll give you a little, explanation of how today is going to go. It is a power hour. I intend for any workshop I do to be not just interactive, but I want you to come away with practical output. You can be lectured to and you can listen and maybe you'd hear something that's valuable, but I want this to be participatory. And so the cycle you'll see is a little bit about my story in each of the 4 stages of career transition, a case study, and then a practical exercise where I actually give you a minute or two to document some stuff, make some notes, whether it's in your phone, your laptop, piece of paper next to you, a whiteboard. So you will have a chance to get some thoughts out today. I believe journaling is one of the exercises that actually helps your brain process. There's a little neuroscience to the coaching aspect of that. And so we'll have a practical experience today. And even by the end, we'll have a chance for you to talk about what takeaways you have. What did you learn? What insights did you gain? And how might you apply them? All right. So of the case studies I talk about, there's one I didn't put in these slides, but I want to mention today because in my book, I have 8 different case studies, and one of them was actually about Pope Francis. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a trivia nugget as folks are mourning his passing, and he meant a lot to a lot of people, that his first career was as a chemist. And you'd never know. It's what he went training through. And I'll give you some more examples today of some more celebrity case studies of careers they had before the career that you know them best. So with that little tease, I'll pull up the slides for today. Okay. Sharing that. And Aram will be doing me a great service of helping me keep an eye on the chat. So as stuff comes up, she will help me there. All right. So as mentioned in the introduction, I won't dwell on this, but I will give you long enough to capture the QR code if you want to. This is my link tree, so it goes to LinkedIn, the book, my YouTube channel. I think Instagram's in there. But really, after 3 years since my own layoff from corporate America, I now identify as a career coach. This is who I am, and I did used to be a sports media executive. But at the beginning of that cycle, when I was launching the business, I very much referred to myself as a former sports media executive who has become a career coach. And so now, 2.5 years later, it's very interesting to me that that identity really is starting to shift, and my ownership of who I'm now and what I'm trying to provide the universe is primary, but it sits on the foundation of having been an executive at Turner Sports with Bleacher Report in product management, general management, product strategy. The last group I ran was research, insights, and data strategies. So had a lot of fun in my career working in sports, but I also still was always volunteering. I was mentoring. I was involved in a lot of professional development areas, which I think was some foresight into what I've now become as my core. So I'm still doing a lot of that volunteering. I teach an undergraduate business course at Emory in the fall, career navigation in sports media and technology, and I do some executive coaching as well. So with that as the background, I'm going to introduce the magical 4 stages of career transition that I go through in my book. So the first stage is realize, that light bulb moment, time for a change. Explore, I'll get into each of these a little bit more later. Articulate, how do I talk about what I want to do? And then activate is like your go-to-market. In the book, there are 9 different exercises. I'm going to only have time for 4 today, give you like a sampler platter of 1 exercise from each stage, just give you a sense and hopefully, again, something practical coming out of this. But I want to start with this question. Hopefully, you're comfortable sharing in the chat. The concept is the midlife career crisis. Maybe some of you are feeling like you're in that territory yourself, but generally, when do you think midlife is? So age-based, 40s, 50s. What about life stage? Do you think that plays a factor? After working for a certain period of time, absolutely. Thanks, Howard. Yep. When you're having your children, when they're going to college, um, sometimes it can be a feeling even. And that's why I introduced the notion of this midlife career crisis. Maybe you've achieved something and you're ready to move on to something else. Thank you for that. In the book, it's chapter 1, literally. I go through the math of it. I go through life expectancy. I go through the trends in when people are getting married, when they're having children. And to me, at the end of the day, it's extremely personal. When you feel like you're in crisis, when you feel like you're in midlife, it's probably different than when you thought when you were 15 or 20, what is midlife? And oh my God, 50 is so old. Well, I launched my book on my 50th birthday. I changed careers around that time. My wife and I are now empty nesters. So for me, that's when it sort of hit, but it was gradually coming. And that's where I sort of delve into this realized stage. So becoming fully aware of something, that light bulb moment, it might be time for a change. So this is how I describe it in the book. I was having the time of my life working in sports for one of the most respected companies in the world. Then I lost my mojo and I lost my job. So yeah, at the layoff, it was a little more obvious. But as I reflected back on the 2 or 3 years prior, as I was developing the book and just wanting to get my thoughts out, I had fallen out of love of working in sports. I'd gone to all the events. It was a blast. It was awesome. And as spoiled as this all sounds, where I was getting my fulfillment from was in the transformation of my team, in helping them succeed in that professional development stuff. That's what was getting me out of bed in the morning. That was more my purpose than just the fun of going to events and traveling around the country for sports. All right, first case study. Has anybody heard of Rich Roll? I don't know if you can raise your hand or say something in the comments. This is somebody I listen to his podcast pretty regularly. Listened to it this morning, actually. He had an episode about meditation with a guy named Dan Harris, who was a former TV anchor. Well, Rich was first an athlete. He was actually such a good athlete. He was a swimmer at Stanford, which was like the gold standard. I grew up a swimmer. I would have loved to have gone to Stanford and been a swimmer there. Out of that, he became a lawyer. That was his first career. But through some unhealthy patterns of his own, he reached this crisis moment we were talking about. For him, it was health. He couldn't climb the stairs. He fell over. That clearly was a signal that something was wrong. It was time for a change. And in one of his podcast episodes, he has this quote: mood follows action. If you want to change your state, you have to take the action first rather than wait until you feel like doing something. If you wait until you feel like it, you might never do it. But have you ever exercised or gone for a walk or gone to a park and it just made you feel better? So that action preceded the feeling, and that's something that I've taken from him. All right, next chat question. How will you know when it's time for a change? What was your signal, or what might be your signal, or what have you seen as other people's signals that realize that light bulb goes off? For Rich, it was health. For me, it was that like love and passion change. Loss of income, unhappiness. I hear from my clients words like I'm stuck, I'm lost, um, toxic environment. Anyone? Just not, maybe have a mismatch with your boss. Something's up, and Brene Brown has this saying like, I got a full body no. Like your just whole body is telling you something is off. Yeah, the loss of job. It's extremely obvious, involuntary. For me, that was like the not the straw that broke the camel's back, but it was actually that urgency hit of like, oh, well, time to launch the other business. And fortunately, I had some preparation time for that. Here's something else to think about, and this is where I'll give you a minute. Personal board of advisors. This went over, it was real popular at the in-person Emory event. So when I think about the different mentors or advisors that can be valuable for you or myself, I thought about 4 different types and going to different people in different moments. So the number one fan, this is like your cheerleader. They're always going to say positive things about you. They're going to make you feel good about yourself, give you confidence, maybe give you a hug. The straight shooter, this is the tough love. They are going to tell you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear. And sometimes you need that to penetrate. The industry leader, this is like the nuance of the industry or function you're in, whether you're in a job search. In some cases, it might be like, well, my parents just don't get it, or my friends don't understand the intricacies of B2B versus B2C, or what it's like in sports or entertainment or finance or real estate. So having somebody on your board that gets it. And then the lifelong friend, to me, this is about your values. They've known you forever. You're considering an opportunity, and they can call a timeout and say, this doesn't feel like it's aligned with your values. Are you sure? So those are the 4. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to write down or type out people in these categories. I realized, Aram, this is where we could use music, like a little interlude. Or for me, I'm going to be thinking about the Okavango Delta mentioned earlier.
Like we need the Jeopardy music.
I know, I know.
So quick question, would you have the same person in more than one category, or is it better to keep
Absolutely
them?
can. Yeah, you can. I think this is a chance, right? Because nobody gets to see your homework. This is a chance to make a little longer list, stretch a little bit. Maybe there's somebody that you feel this way about and you're uncomfortable reaching out. But hopefully what's in all of them is a level of trust, um, honesty. They're going to be candid with you. Um, and so hopefully that's across the four groups. But yeah, you can have somebody that can adapt. For me, I find myself to be the cheerleader. Like people come to me when they need a pick me up. They need that hug or the confidence builder just to remind them that they've got it. They're capable, and not just to say it, but to give them examples. Remember when you did this? Like you're still capable of that. And people talked about the layoff. There's no way a layoff is a compliment. You might see the silver lining, and certainly me as the idealist and cheerleader, I'll find the silver lining, maybe even the gold lining. But a lot of times you need to pick yourself back up. You need to have people around you that have some positivity. If you go to the straight shooter right after you've been laid off, it may not be the best decision. That might drag you down even further when what you need to do is rebound a little bit and then get to a point where maybe you have some options and maybe that they can be honest to you about the options you have. And that's something you knew in your head it wasn't the right decision, but you needed that person to like shake you a little bit.
Thanks.
All right. So I'm curious from the group, which one of these was the easiest for you to identify? Who had a name come to mind that was like, yep, I got that column checked? The lifelong friend. How valuable. You got your fans. This is the fan club. Don't forget you have a fan club. Go to your past performance reviews. Go to your LinkedIn recommendations. This is stuff that you can suppress when you're in a down cycle, but it's there and it's not bullshit. Like this is real stuff that people have said to you. Somebody even told me yesterday that they have a folder that they keep nice things in, and I read an Instagram or a LinkedIn post yesterday. They call it their happy things folder. Save yourself a little happy things folder. I've got actually I talked about this in the virtual workshop. This is my jar that after I got laid off, my assistant had my staff write little notes for me, and they're all really nice things, and I couldn't even get through them without crying. But I keep it on my desk because there are times as an entrepreneur, maybe something didn't go well or you're not feeling great about it, but I have that there as my reminder for confidence. All right, moving on to stage two. What is exploration? And I like both of these definitions because, yes, you can explore and analyze and research forever. Me, I have that paralysis analysis challenge. So you can also explore through testing and experimenting. What might you try that'll give you some feedback along your way? And then, sort of like the board of advisors, this is a quote from the book, asking for help can be a force multiplier that doesn't degrade your dignity. This is a tough one for a lot of people. They're brought up, they're trained, and sometimes negatively reinforced that asking for help is a weakness. And I swear to you, it's not true. If you can lean on those people from that last exercise, so much more is possible. And I don't want people going through this stuff alone. I know privacy is important, confidentiality, and especially when you're vulnerable, it's hard to share. But I give one simple example that's a little lighthearted. Have you ever had that trivia question or that thing you can't think of? And when you start to ask somebody for help on that, it hits your brain before they answer. I think there's something interesting going on there with the brain, which is you've opened yourself up to humility, and somehow that creates space for the answer to come into your head. It's pretty cool. And I think that's what asking for help can do. All right, next case study, Martha Stewart. Does anybody know what her first career was before she was the Martha Stewart we know today? And there's some irony to this, I realize. She was a stockbroker. Really, really smart. Really, in the financial markets, on Wall Street, hardcore. And her transition came when the market was crashing. And I wish I could remember the year. One of the crashes, I think in the 80s. Yeah, one of the, I think it was the bond disaster of the 80s. And that propelled her to changing gears. And yes, she had a downfall in the 2000s, but she's also bounced back from that. So these stories of pivots coming out of difficult times, the resilience that comes with that, very evident. And I know these are celebrity case studies, but look at your friends, look at your parents, look at other role models you have. It's very likely that they had a downturn at some point. And while they might not talk about it, it happened. And this is something I try to share with my kids as well. It's not like this professional version of me was a straight line. The unpaid internships, the difficult bosses, the need for a break at some point, those all happen. But we don't talk about them much. So it seems like everybody's got these nice straight lines and everything goes great. And there's no way social media helps with this. But even those early experiences can be useful later on in your career if they seem unrelated. All right. Has anybody heard of Ikigai? This is a foundational like exploration exercise, Japanese concept. I've fallen in love with this. It is a purpose-driven exercise. And once again, I'm going to give you a minute here. But I learned about this from a colleague at work back when I was at Turner Sports. Started investigating it pre-layoff. And then once I got into this space, I knew I was going to share this article a lot, and I've really embraced it. And as I work on it with my clients, either as co-creation, we can do it as a session, or they do it as a journaling exercise separately. It's not like it gives you the exact answer of what you're supposed to do next. It's not that scientific, and there's some challenges with approaching it that way. What it does is get some thoughts out of your head. And that allows me as a coach to ask you follow-up questions. What words exist on multiple columns? What list did you start with? What list is the longest? What list is the shortest, and why? And this is actually behind me, the calligraphy I drew says the word Ikigai because I just love this so much. All right, so the exercise is here. Make 4 mini lists. You can do this in a Google Sheet, on a Word doc, anywhere you want. Thanks for sharing that article. It explains this a little further. What are your strengths? What are your interests? What demand exists in general in what the world needs? These are meant to be journaled independently. So yes, we'll talk about the intersections at some point, but when you think about your interests, don't worry about your strengths at that point. You may not have the skills currently to go after a space you're interested in where there's a ton of demand. That's okay. It's why I went back to school for coaching. I went through a training program. I got certified. I wasn't ready to launch a business in that until I learned more. I went through that. I've got former colleagues who have now gone to welding school, one in anthropology school, one that's studying to be a therapist. They're in their 40s and 50s. It's okay to start over, and that's okay. So don't be scared off of interests. That might be something that you started your schooling in and got away from. Maybe your parents wanted you to do one thing and you wanted to do something else. Maybe now it's time to explore that. I'm not saying you have to commit every fiber in your being to it yet. This is exploration mode. We're journaling. Nobody has to see your homework. Just get some of this on paper. Demand is where you see growth. Again, not necessarily aligned with strengths and interests yet, but what jobs are popping up? What industry or sector is really popular? Or, like the Wayne Gretzky quote, skate to where the puck is going. Where do you see opportunity in 5 or 10 years? Put your consulting brain on, right? You're all smart people. you have different backgrounds, you have knowledge of certain industries and sectors, you see what's going on, you see these titles popping up that maybe isn't quite where your skill set is now, but you see growth. All that is opportunity. You don't have to pursue it, but once you've gone through this, I've got a client who started with what the world needs. They have something they want to give society. They're very passionate about it. It didn't mean they go into nonprofit necessarily, but when they started their job search, they filtered by Fortune 500 companies that had strong foundations in topics they were passionate about. Now, maybe they work in social responsibility part of the company, maybe they don't, but that might be a way to identify a company that aligns with your values. Look at the board makeup. Is there something you identify with? So each of these is independent, and then you can ask yourself follow-up questions. There's questions in the book, or you can talk to somebody else and ask questions about it. Inevitably, the idea is to come up with a hypothesis of something you might want to either learn more about, because exploration can still be learning. You can try something out, that's exploration as testing or experimentation. Or if you're ready to commit to it, or maybe a couple of different versions, we can go into articulation mode. All right, which of these columns for you was the most challenging? I'm curious about that. Which one was hard to fill out? Because it can change. For the folks that are really humble and don't like to brag, strength is actually hard. You forget, or you don't want to brag, you don't want to talk about it much. In that case, I'm going to show you an exercise in a minute where you ask others around you. You go back to those performance reviews. What are your strengths? And not just what you've done functionally, but how you go about things. Or is it the sum total of what you can do that means you're versatile? Or a generalist, like Matt just said, right? Being a generalist isn't necessarily a bad thing. You may want to pick one of those lanes to approach, because you might be able to be a specialist in several areas. Pick one, see how that goes. Or what roles value generalists, right? Maybe consulting or something like that. Or maybe a smaller company where you have to wear multiple hats. So that still can be a generalist and an advantage for a generalist versus some people that like to be a specialist. I want to do this one thing all day long. I'm really great at it. I enjoy it. And there's a company that values it. Totally fine. So this is different for everybody. All right, moving into articulation. I'll give you a little tough love here. Separating exploration and articulation are really important to me. A lot of clients come to me and say, look at my resume. And I literally refuse until they tell me what role they're going after. Because without that, how am I supposed to judge? I've got a marketing background. If you don't know your audience, how are you supposed to know what brochure to create? Now, I could review it for format and ATS stuff and whatnot. Yes, there's a level of that. But if you really want to put your story out there, right? We've come from realization, ready for a change, exploration, a hypothesis of what I might want to do and which strengths I'm bringing to the table. That becomes your brand. Here's how I'm going to talk about myself to an audience that I know I want to reach and what message resonates best with them. So that's the beginning of articulation. For me, this was a lot of journaling because I did not have my own coach at the time, but I was loving coaching. I was loving the training. I had energy, and I started drafting a business plan. So articulation is putting stuff on paper, putting it in a Word doc, putting it in your iPhone notes, wherever you want to put it, seeing the words, maybe bouncing them around with people, mission, goals, branding, services, who are my target prospects, what might my pricing be? So I got a lot of this out, even pre-layoff. I was very committed to my job. I did not want to leave the company. I loved what I was doing. But that light bulb went off at some point that I need to look out for myself and decide what I want to do next. And by the time I met coaching, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Still working hard, still had a team, 2 feet in. But on tougher days during a couple of company acquisitions, I'd make some notes or do that on the weekend. So I began to articulate my next path. In the articulate phase, there's a couple of former athletes I profile in the book. Yes, my background is the sports business. Abby Wambach wrote one of the best leadership and transition books of all time called The Wolf Pack. And it's definitely relevant for professional athletes or even college athletes that want to transition to the next chapter of their career. And that's really tough. I've worked with a bunch of them. Their identity since age 5 was being that athlete. And that's really how they were known. It's where they got their confidence from. And so making a transition from that to anything else is really difficult. She gave a commencement speech at Barnard College. You can see that video. It's awesome. And then she wrote this book called The Wolf Pack. And then since then has really developed a content-based career. She has video content out there on streaming services. She has a podcast with her wife. Really impressive articulation of her next chapter that I think is super impressive. And she had this quote: "If I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it would be this: you were never the Little Red Riding Hood. You were always the wolf." So think about that exploration process, the self-realization, the self-awareness, the confidence building to then go to market with something different than your entire life identity had been wrapped around in. All right, journaling exercise. 5 questions for self-discovery. This begins to build some of your brand attributes, if you will. What are those building blocks of that personal brand? Yes, that could be LinkedIn headline at some point or your about section, but it's also how you might answer interview questions, how you talk about yourself. If you're an entrepreneur, this is how you talk about your business, not necessarily yourself. Although for me, it's sort of wrapped up in the same thing. So you can answer one of these. You don't have to answer all these in this session, but you can also, Aram's going to email a version of this out afterwards, so you can work on it later. What's your superpower? What do people compliment you on? I like to think about that as like the phone a friend. If anybody remembers Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, what are you the phone a friend for? And make it silly. This does not have to be serious. It does not have to be boring, all professional. But do people lean on you when they need a laugh? Do they come to you because you're really organized and can help them process and structure things? What do people come to you for? And you can ask people these questions. What am I great at? People you trust, those advisors we talked about earlier, your family members, your friends, your colleagues. And not just what do you do, but how do you go about it? Are you collaborative? Do you build consensus? Are you direct? And that's a strength of yours. People really like you for that. How do you achieve the results you've achieved? Think about your process because it is unique and you have special talents that are coming through, and you may not think about it as you're executing, especially when you're in the fire and you're at work and you're busy as heck. How are you going about those things that allows those results to happen? Maybe you're a great listener. Which of these questions did you find helpful for digging something out that you hadn't thought of previously? 1 through 5. Did any of them spark something for you that you weren't thinking about? I'm always curious about this because it helps me ask better coaching questions. Superpower. Yeah, you have superpowers. People come to you for things. It might be personal stuff, but still, that's part of you. We don't have to compartmentalize professional and personal, and I get the reality of that in some offices. But when you're doing this self-analysis, you can do assessments, of course. I've got a list of those, but digging some of this stuff out in real time, it's almost like having a little focus group about yourself. Take some vulnerability again, but coming up with these thoughts might be the key to how you talk about yourself in a persuasive way. All right, now we're going to market. What does that look like for you? Well, for me,
That quick question on the last slide.
yeah,
On number three, you had mentioned, what do people come to you for? I've seen a lot of coaches and speakers like say, oh, go ask people, how would they describe? Do you find that, like, again, to me, I feel like it has to be someone who's like trustworthy to be honest with you without, without being
yeah.
held. But do you find that sometimes like that could be skewed because obviously people they want to be nice, they want to say nice things, um, but not necessarily just accurate.
My my question back is why not? Why
Okay,
not get some data? You don't have to pre-filter. We're just gathering data.
okay,
And so if you start to hear some things more than once, right, that might build your confidence in that thing. What's more likely to happen, because I've run into a lot of people that have this sort of like humility dichotomy, is you're more likely not to believe something that is true. And so it might take the right person to get you to believe it. I
makes
think
sense.
that's more likely than the false negative, honestly. Yes, people are nice, but your self-awareness isn't zero.
Yeah, yeah,
And so yeah, you might have to filter through it, but just gather data. Gather data. Don't pre-filter, don't prejudge. Some of this information might be more useful than others. It's okay. You're gathering for the first time in some cases. And it's okay to grab a bunch of data because then you've got a sample size that's big enough to maybe find those triangulations.
thank you.
Okay. So this to me was a tough one because I was doing some of this work pre-layoff. And I wasn't a Boy Scout, but I feel like I operate like one. Prepared doesn't have to mean paranoid because paranoid implies anxiety in a negative form of anxiety. Prepared, I have what I call a get ready package for people now. Yes, there's people I work with that have been laid off, and that's an honor to be able to help them through that tough time. But I also have the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts of the group, which are I see a change coming and I want to have some stuff on the shelf ready. The benefit of that is the mental state of being, because if you're in stress mode the first time you're thinking about alternatives, it's very, very difficult. And so, to the extent you can get your brain going a little bit without feeling disloyal, that was an important word for me at the time. And going through a couple of company acquisitions, what I realized actually with my first coach was my loyalty was to my leaders, individuals that had been around a long time. My loyalty was less to the company anymore. That was just honest. And I figured that out in that conversation with the coach that opened my mind. And that was actually the coaching session where I said, this is valuable. And I think I can do that. And that's when I began my training and coaching. So just getting the ball rolling a little bit mentally, trying to compartmentalize from your work, which is still important, um, doesn't mean you're paranoid. You just want to be prepared. It's probably the same advice you'd give a younger version of yourself or mentees that you have. What should they do to be prepared? Something. But your definition of ready might be different than somebody else, so you have to sort of respect that too. Last case study. Did anybody know what Gandhi's profession was before he became what we all know him to have become? He was a lawyer. Makes a lot of sense. But he also experienced his first set of significant discrimination that he writes about when he was in South Africa, not in India, but South Africa. And so I love reading some of the biographies of these people was really energizing and inspiring. Nonviolence, infinitely superior to violence. Forgiveness is more manly than punishment. And I just love that message. So the last exercise, I can't leave career transition without talking about networking. We'll do this for about 5 minutes, leave some time for insights and some questions. So I do work with a lot of people that just hate networking. They don't enjoy it. They don't want to talk to people. my generation, the younger generation. Um, and so I respect that notion. One of the ways I ask people to change their perspective, not their habits, not their preferences, but thinking about networking as a research project first, not transactional, but research. If you're in that exploration mode, you want to talk to people, learn what their environment's like. What's that job like that I might want to invest in new skills? What's anthropology school like? So think about networking as a research project. And if that's the case, how do you identify people you might learn from? What connection might you have to them? Alma mater, hometown, similar childhood. You saw them at a conference. What do you want to ask for? Advice, time. I think about an ask spectrum. Like clearly, people think about this as asking for a job, right? Help me get a job. And that's like the hardest ask you could possibly have outside of like getting funding for your startup. But there's some easier asks to start with on early contacts. What's your advice? What industry newsletter do you recommend? What podcast do you think I should listen to learn more about this? That's asynchronous stuff. Doesn't take time away. Hopefully you're people that people have asked for help from, and you know this difference, right? If they're asking for a 1 hour Zoom call or a 1 hour coffee or lunch, that's more of you to give. Maybe start on something simpler, again, on the research side. And then when a job or internship pops open, you've already had that conversation. You've built a relationship. You've proved you've listened. Maybe you've shared something with them in return that's provided value for them. Now you can go up that ask scale and maybe ask for something that seemed tougher at the time earlier on, but you've developed a relationship. They've said point blank, let me know when you see a job is posted. That's permission to follow up when the time is right, in, of course, a professional way, and maybe make that tougher ask. But if you don't ask, they're not really sure what you're getting at. I saw a post the other day that said, please stop asking if you could pick my brain. Now, fundamentally, I don't have a problem with that phrase, but somebody might. So you might have to experiment with messaging a little bit. And of course, whether that's LinkedIn messaging, email, text, in person, cocktail party, all this can change. But I developed this method for people that maybe didn't have confidence or desire to get into networking. This makes it a little more gamified, a little more research based. And yes, the mnemonic is I can, because I believe everybody can. You can do it in your own way. You don't have to be that other person that's self-promoting and out there like crazy talking loud. You can do it your own way, but still be your own advocate. All right, wrapping up here. I'm so curious what you guys came away with. What was something you learned today that was valuable? What insight did you have? And how might you apply that immediately? So if you're comfortable with answering any of those, number one, write them down for yourself. I don't need to know, the group doesn't need to know, but if you share, others might see what you've shared and learn from that. What did you learn today?
And if you rather, if you want to raise your hand and come off mute, feel free to do that.
Or I think there's even a way you can message it to a ROM directly if you prefer to be anonymous, and she can read those out.
Oh, there. All right, we have some great feedback.
Yeah, maybe get ahead of it before before it happens. Ooh, that perfect resume. I've never seen one of those. They don't exist. I trained in product management. We had this awesome concept called minimum viable product, MVP. And the idea is to launch something good enough so that you get valid data and feedback in return. Based on that real world data and feedback, then you can iterate on your product. Think about what goes on with your favorite apps and when they make updates, or maybe they're doing beta testing. Same thing applies for resume.
And then we got a private comment saying, build a board of directors, find out what the world needs and try to match with strengths.
Dang. Boom, boom, boom. Thank you for that. Networking as research. Yeah. When I managed my research team, I really got to know introverts, obviously, and I sort of sit on the border myself, and can adapt and flex, but um, they had no interest in seeing people in person. They were the last people that wanted to come back from pandemic and work from home, and they were absolutely more productive at home. Having the virtual meetings, reaching out to regional offices, they got way more comfortable. So thinking from their perspective, because obviously there's nothing wrong with being an introvert. You have lots of skills. It's important to embrace every type of diversity. Um, Thinking about that one thing they don't want to do and characterizing it as research is a logical pivot. Because if you're naturally curious, gather the information. And I got that from one of our senior bosses, actually EVP of the company gave that advice in a session we had internally. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'll go to my last slide. You can hit the QR code again, but absolutely open for questions. So I'll bring the slides down.
All right, if you have any questions, feel free to either come off mute or put it in the chat. And same as with your comments, if you want to ask a question anonymously, feel free to send it to me separately, and I will read it out for you. But this has been an amazing session. It's like I was there for the event at the brewery, but it's one of those things where you learn something new every time, and that's one of the things that the beauty of coaching that I love. These webinars that I sit in, you learn something new every time, which is amazing.
Yeah, I wish I had time to share all the exercises because it
Mhm.
sort of goes through a cycle. This is like, it truly was like the sampler platter, or like that cruise where you like get to see like that island for 6 hours.
Yep.
You might get a sense of it, but like stay overnight once. And there's different things that might help people. And of course, I'm one coach with these exercises. There's lots of resources out there. You might make a connection with somebody else better. Like there's plenty of great coaches. They're the nicest people in the whole world.
So we have
Uh,
a question about the book.
yep.
Any best practices about writing the book? How long it
Yeah.
took you, and was it very rewarding?
Thanks. I'm going to assume your name's Rodrigo by your handle. If it's not, I apologize. Best practices for me was a differentiable concept at the beginning in an outline. Once I had those, even though my outline changed later, 1/3 of my book I wrote on my iPhone on a 16-hour flight to Japan, the one where I ended up doing the calligraphy thing. So what that means to me is a little sense of what you want to do, something you're passionate about, and then time. And not just time without distraction. Because how much of that do we have? Yes, it's rewarding. I just, this chapter of my career is about helping people, period. I had the corporate career I dreamed of and more. And so putting this book in people's hands, putting it on Kindles, getting it out there, being able to do workshops like this. I was at a networking event a few weeks ago, ran into somebody, and they pulled my book out of their backpack. I had a student client, somebody who's a recent graduate, um, buy the book for their mother who'd been laid off. Like to me, that's super touching. So thanks for that question. Danger zones, paralysis analysis. You can stay in explore mode forever. And for you, you're going to have to identify a timeline. It may be a preferred timeline. It may be a probable timeline. Whatever that timeline is, time boxing the stages. How long might I be able to spend in exploration mode? For some people, that's a luxury. You don't have time for it. You need to get the next job, even if it might not be fulfilling. I respect that completely. But paralysis analysis and explore mode is difficult. I'd say the other thing is after the activate stage, thinking you're done. This is a cycle. We know now, I know now more that stability in corporate America is not maybe what we thought it was. That's a tough wake up call. And being perpetually prepared seems exhausting to me. So I'm not saying you have to sort of go through this cycle and always be ready. That might lean towards the paranoia, but you know, you'll have these documents to go back to. If you uncover some of this stuff in your Ikigai process or your branding exploration, keep those somewhere safe and remember you have them because it might remind you of something that's gone into your subconscious again, of something you might want to try next time. Um, Other questions, and yeah, they can be sent
Other
directly.
question.
If you want to be anonymous, is fine. Or you can come on camera and ask.
And while we're waiting for questions, I did want to let you guys know, our next webinar is actually on Wednesday, May 7th, and it aligns really well with Scott's webinar. You know, this is really good if you're prepping for a career transition, but you know, if you do have that sudden layoff, our next session is it focuses on the mindset part of dealing with the career transition. So it's resilient and ready, protecting your mindset through career transitions with our alumni coach, Natalie Weister. And it'll be here again on Zoom at 12 p.m. May 7th. All right,
All right.
a question. How would you approach explaining a resume gap?
So I want to mention something before people get off, because we got 26 people left. You came here live, you spent time, you invested in yourself. If anybody sends me one of their exercises to my email address, or you can DM it on LinkedIn, scott@doyneservices.com, I'll ask you follow-up questions or give you feedback on one of your exercises. Any of these 26 people, just remind me. A resume gap. It's tough to do this without getting into the weeds. One of the most common might be parental leave, or if I'm reading your mind, it might be layoff in a gap before you have your new thing. If you think about that, oh, thank you, Matt, I guess. If you think about that when you get into an interview situation, if someone were to ask you that question, what do you think they might see value in as your answer? And I'm not saying you've filled that gap yet, but I'll give you some examples. I've been learning. Here are some certificates. I've been researching. Here's some things I've learned. I've been doing. Look at these experiments I've done in AI. I've got a proposal for you of an idea based on what I read about what's going on in your company right now. I know that sounds like extra work. And you don't necessarily have time for that if you've made finding your job your full-time job. But if you've got an answer for that interview question, that will help. Or now, right, if you might get that interview question in 3 months, what might you start doing now that gives you a better answer when you get to that interview question? Moving from explore to articulate. Trial is my best answer. This world of side hustles is unbelievable now. The gig economy, being able to try stuff out, maybe in private, it may be more public. Like if somebody wants to be a data scientist, there's all kinds of data sets on Kaggle to play with. And you find out how much you enjoy that, perhaps. For me, I had to do pro bono coaching sessions as part of my certification process. I got to see if I liked coaching. I started a training program to see if I liked coaching. So it might be the education phase, it might be trial, you might want to launch something, you may beta launch something. But maybe is there a way you can try something you might be interested in? And how might you go about that is how I'd ask that. because that inevitably will help with your articulation mode. Because you found something that at least resonates for you and maybe even for a prospective employer or a client.
These are great questions.
I love it.
So we have time for maybe one or two more if you guys have any other questions.
Yeah. Setting time aside to think, breathe, document. We often don't have time for this in our day. And so you're in stress mode. And it's hard to be open-minded in stress mode. And that's the one thing I'd say when I look back at my process, that journaling exercise where I began to be open-minded about what else I might do, that created that little window, like that trivia question example, it created a little window so that when I was in that coaching session, I was able to see and hear something that resonated. But
Just
thanks for
another quick
everybody's time.
reminder, Scott is offering to review one of your exercises for you. I'll have his contact information in the follow-up email. So, and he did actually put together a handout, with the exercises for you guys also that I will include in the email afterwards. Thank you guys again for joining us today. Once again, our next session is on May 7th, and we will see you then. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you guys for being here.
Bye.